Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Kirsty Mackie. I'm here to talk to you about reality capture technology and how you can use that to bring reality into gaming. I'm going to start with a fun little video that some of you might recognize. There's no sound.
Okay. There you go.
Sir, they're in.
Yes, we have it.
You should be able to see the chemical plant architecture.
Which one's Bond?
He's the Psy, he's the trident thingy.
Give us a layout.
Right.
So that's from one of the James Bond movies where they're using laser scanning technology. You can't quite scan through walls. It's not like that. It's more like getting what you can see in terms of line of sight. But it's quite a cool example of my relationship with reality capture technology, all about getting those layouts that Q was trying to get for Bond there in his location and using it to get accurate dimensions of things. So today my goal is to introduce you all to reality capture, what it actually means, what that involves, and then give you some uses of reality capture and gaming. We did a workshop this year, so Oliver was the co-host with me. I'll come on to a bit more about him in a moment. We did a point cloud to meshing workshop. So we had that this year, and last year we did a laser scanning workshop where we did some example captures as well. So the overview will be what is reality capture, and then go through a bit more about some specific examples, and then some final thoughts that may be useful to you in your applications. But before I go any further, a bit more about me. So I've been using point clouds for over a decade now. I actually went into this through my geography degree, where I was using photogrammetry to create 3D models of landforms and trying to understand how they were created. So that's actually some photogrammetric pictures that have been used to create a 3D model of Fox Glacier in the South Island. And then I worked at an engineering firm for quite a while, where I was using this technology to get accurate measurements for surveying. So worked as a survey technician for a while. But for the last 3 years, I've been working at a company called Global Survey, and they specifically focus on the technology. I do technical support and distribute the products, so all the laser scanners, DJI drones, CHC navigation, LiDAR, so a few different types of reality capture products. So really cool getting to see this stuff changing every day. Before I go to the next slide, one thing I would say is coming from a background in surveying into them working at Global Survey, the variety of applications I've then learned about is astounding to me. And one of my largest clients uses the same data I used for surveying, but in game engines to create the backdrops for their movie effects, which is crazy when I get all these accurate measurements and then they go out and use this data, but cut it up and move it into different pieces so that they can use it. Whereas from a survey perspective, you don't want to change any of that. It's exactly as it was measured, because that's what you want to get, those accurate measurements. So a bit about Oliver, just because he's contributed to some of this content and was the co-host for the workshop. He's been using some of this technology for looking at as-built. So his background is at the top, he's got a BIM file there that he's then taken into Houdini to create some realistic looking effects. Less reality capture there, but more of a visual effects perspective, creating 3D models of designs. And he's just started his own company called PrintViz, where they're doing 3D printing and 3D modeling. Cool. So what is reality capture? I'm going to keep this one very broad. Typically, it's about creating capturing the real world and creating a 3D representation of it. There's lots of thoughts on what that might actually entail, whether it's just 360 cameras, 3D photorealistic meshes, and point clouds. Typically, when people say reality capture technology, they're referring to things that can create point clouds or meshes that look realistic. I've got on the screen here Peter the T-Rex from Auckland War Memorial Museum. This capture took me about 8 minutes. The lighting conditions work great for the actual colorization of the model, but I've got very accurate dimensions of the actual model, so it's a pretty cool mesh from the point cloud. So this technology developed from the principles of surveying, and in surveying you go out with total station and GPS devices. When I was working in surveying, it definitely didn't look this glorious. or using tape measures, and you get 1 or 2 measurements per minute, so it's quite slow, whereas this technology has revolutionized our industry because you're getting now 4 million points per second with the laser scanners that we've got today. So it just looks a lot more realistic, and you've got so much more data because each point is now colored. So point clouds are like the base of this. Some of you might be aware of it from games like The Voidness. They look quite different to the point cloud shown here. But what they've got in this video is walking through, trying to scan the environment, and it's actually a horror game where you then find the person unsuspectingly in the dark, and the whole game will then terminate. But point clouds look a lot like this, just a cloud of points in space, a set of X, Y, Zs. Cool. So this is a point cloud from up in Auckland of a road that I did. I thought this would be quite a good example of how they look when you kind of zoom in. So that's on the pavement from the same scan. You're getting like less than 3 millimeter spacing on those measurements, but it just looks realistic there. And then zoomed in a little bit more, you can start to see a bit more of those points, and I've picked some of them. So you can really see it's all just measurements, but they look realistic because of the accuracy and colorization. This is from Fort Balance in Miramar. So I went out and scanned that. It took about 40 minutes. The colors on the graffiti there I thought were really cool. And just again, kind of zooming in and seeing some of the distances between those points is pretty crazy. It's trying to tell me it's 0 millimeter spacing, which isn't quite right, but still very low nonetheless. Cool. So there's 2 main capture methodologies when it comes to reality capture. There's photogrammetry, where you have a series of overlapping images and you're trying to reconstruct what's there. And then there's laser scanning, where you have a laser going onto a mirror and then the whole thing rotates so that you then get a load of measurements around you. There is a bit of a bias that laser scanning is more accurate because you're getting ground-based measurements there and then, rather than photogrammetry, which is a reconstruction. However, it really depends on your scale. If you're doing a really large site and you're using tons of terrestrial scans or a handheld scanner, then you're going to get errors that start adding up. So some photogrammetry examples from a very long time ago that I did. This is for gully monitoring. So you can see there's a load of picture positions in that diagram, just kind of showing where the cameras would have been. And then from that, I was able to create a 3D model. And then this is another example, really how I got into all of this through that glacier. So a series of pictures. It's using Agisoft Metashaper for this one. Create a sparse cloud and then make it denser through adding it all up. And this is a video, went too quick there. This is a video of that actual glacier. So as you start zooming in, you can kind of see quite a few of the details. There's a few holes around, depending on the perspective to the glacier. So here there's a few more because I couldn't get right up to that terminus. Not very safe, unfortunately. But getting some awesome details there. Cool. So yeah, laser scanning. This is just quite a good visual of how it looks when you have the laser scanner mirror rotating and then the whole thing in 360. And there's many different types of that, which I'll come on to in a moment. One thing to bring up with terrestrial scanning is that you're getting the point cloud in position, and then that point cloud is only colorized because 360 images are taken at the same time. In the past, people used to take pictures, and then people still do it today, actually, because you can get higher accuracies with this, but you can take tons of pictures and then apply those onto the point clouds or the mesh outputs to create that realistic looking environment. So this is the picture that's associated with that scan, and it's just another piece of the data. In engineering and surveying, we don't really use these pictures so much. So it's something that I'm seeing being utilized a lot more now when some of my clients are using Unreal Engine to take these outputs and create like visuals of their designs to engage their stakeholders who don't really understand like the BIM files as they are raw. So this is just a few different laser scanners. And what I wanted to highlight with this is that there's lots of different types of laser scanners, and no one point cloud that comes from any of these devices is the same. So there's like a giant scanner which can scan up to 1 kilometer, to a handheld one where you can scan up to 25 meters. Their ranges all change and the amounts of measurements they're taking are drastically different. The RTC is the one that's the most common for movie users and visual effects, and then also worldwide for gaming. I haven't got as many clients in New Zealand actually using this for gaming as yet, but the actual pictures on that being 4K resolution are the main reason. So there's a few different types. You can have the setup-based ones. They typically produce the densest data, which is much more regular and much more beautiful with the images on there. And that's kind of the most common so far. But there's tons of handheld devices nowadays as well. The point clouds aren't as pretty, but they are still getting some of those features out if that's what you're after. And then we have autonomous applications, which are all changing the way that we interact with the technology. So there's a few robots going around the country now. This is one of my clients that 3D printed the robot and then put one on the top, put a scanner on the top and then stopped it throughout a culvert. There's a few others that are coming around now as well. But what I'm really highlighting here is the difference in the quality. So you can see that there's, on the right-hand side, we've got the actual handheld scanning, and it looks quite scratchy. And that's because you've got it like scanning as you're moving around. When it's actually in place and it's uniform, you're getting a much more even spacing to all the points, which can make the data look a lot better. So same environment, different times, as you can tell by the car, but drastically different outputs. So pros and cons for gaming. Well, you're getting very high density. That can also be a con, which we'll come on to. It's very fast in terms of the capture and the representation. It's very realistic looking, and it's very easy to learn. So this is a video from Silo Park that some of you might recognize. This is actually looking at the design of the stairway, because there was an engineering client that was looking at this, wanting to actually map it and have some examples of the measurements for it so they could adjust it. But it's quite a cool environment if you've got all the silos that you could put in the backdrop of the game as well. And then this is another one from up in Auckland, which is, it's not a drone, this is actually static scans that were taken along the side of the road. You've got a lot of information, you'll see a bit more of this one later, but you're able to get all the measurements and distances across from it. Yeah, and then there's the cons. So I did the workshop and I tried to explain this. I was like, I hope none of your computers will look like this by the end of today. Luckily they didn't. But the meshes that you can create from reality capture data can have really high poly counts, and that's then really hard to deal with. So you then have to have a lot of storage space to be able to handle it, and quite good PC hardware. So good graphics cards and typically a lot of RAM. But it's getting a lot lighter, and over the last few years, they've optimized all of the outputs so that you do get lighter outputs, and technology for our computers is getting much better and more easily accessible. So hopefully this won't be as much of a problem going forward. So capturing the real world, creating a 3D digital representation of it, quite broad, typically referring to technology creating point clouds, and two main types are photogrammetry and laser scanning. Some of you, who has an iPhone 12 Pro or above? Does anyone here? Okay, a few of you. Have any of you played with the LiDAR functionality? Got a few nods? So I'm talking all about a lot of the Leica examples that I'm very familiar with, but if you have those iPhones 12 Pro or later, you can make your own out of just using the iPhone apps. You can download a load of them that are on the iPhone App Store. Yeah, definitely give that a play if you didn't know it was there. The limitation of those ones is just doing larger sites, but certainly for smaller sites, it's a bit of a combination of LiDAR and photogrammetry. So you could use that to create some very photorealistic looking models. Awesome. So that's a bit of a spiel introducing all of it. How is this relevant to gaming? I'm going to go through some examples now. So these are kind of the three ways I divide it up. Capturing environments is a really critical one. So you're getting a whole set or the whole scene for your game. Capturing reusable 3D assets is another one. And then capturing some of the lighting conditions if that's important for your scene. So iRacing, they do race car simulations. It's online and it's also simulation kits that you can sit at and drive through. They're quite well known for creating very realistic experiences when you're driving through the simulations. And this is because they use a lot of laser scanning technology to create all the scenes for their games. So even here, like, this picture looks pretty amazing with the graphics. You can see like the ground details on the road there, and the way that they've done the moisture on the ground effects through it is really awesome. And that's what one of the setups can look like if you're not playing it through the online environment. So what they've done is they've used these laser scanners, which can go really far distances, to scan real-world tracks and then take those and have an exact replica in their game that they can then manipulate to suit the game itself. So this is a very zoomed out perspective of one of the tracks that they've got, but all the dots that you can kind of just about see on the screen are the positions of the scans. Unfortunately, it's not as intuitive to understand this one just because it's not colorized at this point. They take thousands of photos and then combine it with their laser scanner to be able to colorize it. This is a bit more zoomed in. This is from one of the YouTube videos that I've got up the top, where they're going through actually doing the laser scanning along the track. And then from that, they'll pull out surfaces that they can then model. This is one of the key guys for all of this. If you are interested in this, definitely give it a little watch. But what you can see here as they zoom in is just the amount of details they've got through that scanning. So they basically scan the track. They go through and take pictures of specific elements that they want to have, like some high poly meshes, which look very realistic on the sides of the track. They take a load of pictures of the whole environment for the texturing, and then they model the geometry by going over and basically tracing the point cloud to create their models. And then they take it to Unreal Engine, and that's kind of their base environment. Why would you want to do that? Well, if you have the accurate track geometry, more accuracy in the geometry looks more realistic, but also it means the way that you simulate your experience through the game is taking into effect like the actual differences and distances between different items in the game. So if they have the exact track dimensions, they can take that into account when they're moving around. They actually have a load of former race car engineers who are involved in this, and they simulate a lot of the movements through the track by thinking about the wear and tear from the car onto the road, and then taking into account all of the small details like bumps in the road. And then this is actually from one of their newer releases where they've got dirt tracks, and they've taken heat maps of the entire track and then combined that with the accurate geometry to be able to simulate any potential like puddles and changes in resistance to the cars as you're moving around the track. And that's going quite crazy into the details there. But the idea of being able to have those dimensions and use them to simulate a more realistic gaming experience is pretty awesome. So they use an older scanner that doesn't have an inbuilt camera. Nowadays, a lot of them do. This is like a scan that I've taken that I've then colorized from the point cloud. It doesn't look very good. It looks quite like blurry. But if you actually use the camera, the output that you can get from it is much better and much more photorealistic. So that's just relying on using the high-res pictures along with that underlying geometry. And that one was the RTC data that I got in Fort Balance. Slightly different to gaming, but quite a good example as well, is for Squid Game. It came out in 2021, very popular Netflix documentary. They used, oh, I hope that's a good laugh. So capturing those scenes when they get them, they were using it for a lot of their live action sequences. So same idea, when they're looking at the distances with the cars on the track, in the TV show, they're then using the actual distances for the fight scenes to simulate some of their VFX over the top. So the one down in the corner is one particular scene where they used that. The studio that did that is 75mm studio, and they also use this for a lot of their other scenes. So they did this example through a tunnel where they went and scanned the tunnel to then do a like pre-viz concept for the scene, and then driving some of the cars through there. But then they use that right at the end through with combining like on-set acquisition when they do the filming. So they have the accurate colors and model at the time of filming, combine that with the video, and then do the final post-production changes on all the surfaces around, because you've got like that exact replica of the scene at the time of filming. So pretty awesome. So the John Wick and Joker movies, they also use this technology to capture this for backdrops and manipulation of the lighting. So this is the long-range scanner. So you've got it on like the rooftop of some of the buildings in New York. And the point cloud that came out wasn't colorized, but the key thing again was those distances being accurate between the buildings. Have any of you heard of Unrecord? Yeah. So that's the game that came out, I think it was 2022 or early 2023. And there was a lot of discussion online about how it was actually created. That was all photogrammetry and laser scanning data. And there was this video which was released showing it in Unreal Engine. So it's a shooter game, and they've got the shooter coming above, and you can actually see them moving through. And the actual detail on the ground there is pretty insane. So as you go through, you can kind of see all the details. And you're capturing the positions of the light sources and the puddle on the ground. So quite a lot of cool details, and people were really impressed by the realism of the game. So I've got this model that I got, which is quite a low point scan, which was taken with a handheld scanner. This took 30 minutes. It was just around the corner at the stadium. So now you can get, this could be taken, for instance, to get the geometry of the scene and use that as a backdrop for one of your games. The key thing about the actual point clouds is that they're measurements, and they're something that you can use to inspire and create as the backdrop for these games. Cool. So onto another example, focusing less on the big scale and more on the small scale. Quixel mega scans. How many of you have used this in your games? Okay, quite a few of you. Shame that they're going to be charging for it next year. But good, now that you're armed with the knowledge, you can use your iPhone to create some things that are similar. So they've got this massive library of photogrammetric and laser scanned items that you can then download and bring into some of your games or movie environments. It's pretty amazing the details that you get in a lot of these elements. But if you wanted to create some of these with your iPhone or other devices, or even just taking a load of pictures, that is a possibility. There's a sequence that comes up in a bit which has a load of rocks, and there was a speaker last year who spoke about how they'd done some scanning in Miramar of some rocks there, and how through a load of the movies that they'd been involved in, it's just the same rock that they've rotated and moved through all the scenes. It blew my mind. Cool. One of the largest divisions of reality capture technology for Leica worldwide is actually public safety. This is not a real example of a police crime scene. This was a made-up one on the day, as you can see by the dummy on the ground there. Some of these have been used in games, more from overseas, but you can actually take out the car crash scene and then use that as a model in the back of your dystopian gaming environment. It's pretty amazing, like the level of detail you'll get on the actual features around it. More of a local example, if we wanted to bring some like New Zealand context into some of our games, this would be something that would be really cool in a game. So the Waka, this is from the Auckland War Memorial Museum. The lighting is a bit funky because we tried to put some harsh lighting around it to keep it like constant the whole way around, but then there was gaps as you move around. So we used some pictures in the end that we took separately. But as you zoom in on the end, you can see that all the points have captured a lot of details on the end there, but it's quite hard to then translate that into the mesh. So yeah, so the point cloud base, then you can create a mesh. This one's a little bit noisy, but there's a lot that you can do to kind of refine it. And then the texture applied from the pictures. So it is possible to take that and create a mesh that you could then take into your game. Cool. So capturing lighting conditions. If you're using a real world environment, having exact positions of where the lights are when you're doing that, this is more common for movie sets, as you can see from here. You can then know where the light sources are and use that to simulate the lighting effects on your game as the user moves through by having knowledge of where that position actually is. You could also block the lighting source if that was something you wanted to do. Or you could capture at a specific time of day to get the lighting across that scene at that point. And for this site, this is exactly what they did for this pier for a movie that they were doing. You can go through, get it at sunset, and then use that sunset lit backdrop and edit it in the movie afterwards. For this Unreal example, for Unrecord, sorry, I was quite impressed looking at the puddle on the ground, how it was like moving around. So actually having the position and then the knowledge of the lighting conditions. They've obviously done something clever in the background there to manipulate that. But generally getting the scans and the pictures at a overcast environment, so there's a constant colouring across it so that you can then manipulate it, is what most people would do. Cool. So that's just kind of an overview of some of the examples and ways you can do it. Some final thoughts to go through. I always get told the meshes and the poly counts are the problem when it comes to a lot of these applications. So that's because we've got so many points with the actual point clouds themselves. So for this one, this is just a point cloud that I took with one static scan. This is an initial mesh I made of it. So 232,000 triangles for it. You can reduce that down and it will keep some of the details, and then the surfaces that are more similar heights can be merged. So that's taken it down 61% to 91,000 triangles. Or you could have used a different strategy from the beginning and still get some of those details, and this is 15,800. So there's a few different techniques out there, and it's really about how you mesh that data that really affects those final counts. Another example, this is for building extraction, so a completely different application. But if you wanted to pull out like the edges of the features and just make a mesh for each one, you can just build a model that has those dimensions without being too dense. So probably would do that with a cooler example than that one, but if there was any cool real world geometries that you wanted to bring into your games, then you could do that too. This is something I always tell my clients is anything you can see, you can extract. So for this one, I've got some polylines that I've extracted from the paint lines. Then the ground surface mesh. I could get some contours out if I wanted to. Can pull out the power lines as well. Like everything in that is a measurement and you're just taking out what you want from it. So you don't have to use all of it, is basically what I'm saying. This one came up last year, is people trying to laser scan people. Generally, I wouldn't recommend it because we move, and as soon as the laser scanner goes off, it will capture that movement, so you'll be quite blurry. This is an example from the other day. I think we were moving quite a bit, but you can see like her head to the side and her body's being offset from some of her movements around. This is quite exaggerated, but you get the idea. You get lots of ghosting around. So if you're trying to scan people, or model people, I definitely go for photogrammetry instead. These rigs can be expensive though, so I definitely speak more investigation into these. So they have like 120 cameras set up and all the shutters go off at the exact same point. And the idea there is that you're getting a much more cohesive model without that movement that we get through laser scanning. Having said this, I did some work with an artist, I think it was last year, maybe the year before, Russ Flats. He liked this movement of people through scenes to try and show the connection between the local iwi and the land, and has got some amazing movements of the people trying to stand as still as possible, but it looks slightly ghosted, the people standing around. So if you're interested in that, please check his website out. So another point, a bit randomly, there's this LINS data service online, and if you're looking for like larger scale assets that you can use, like there's loads of height maps of all of New Zealand, you could go and download these and also the LiDAR data sets themselves to create backdrops of some of the environments. And I hadn't spoken to many people actually doing this, but then I had my workshop and someone came and spoke to me about how they were doing this exactly for their gaming environment. So this is all free data, and it's great if you're doing larger scale backdrops. So definitely recommend giving it a go. So thank you very much for coming to this talk. If you want to hear more about reality capture, we do have a free webinar series called Arch NZ, which is online. So you can go and check that out. We've got loads of interesting stories there, and you can also hire our equipment. Do we have any questions? Cool. Yeah. So the official recommendation is that you shouldn't scan in the rain. Most of the devices are at least IP54 rated and they can handle a little bit of splash. But yeah, if you scan in the rain, it will try and scan the rain droplets, and then you end up with a load of noise. And it's because the scanners are so fast nowadays that just ends up being a big problem. So you're going to make more problems for yourself having to clean it up. Though there is a bit of autonomy in those workflows now, they still take time. And then in terms of reflective materials, depends on what type of device you're using. They all have different ways that they use. Like our BLK360 is a bit more sensitive to black surfaces, but like our RTC gets them fine. So each sensor is slightly different, and unfortunately they don't give you all the info.
Cool, thanks. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about your experience integrating with Unreal, what sort of pipeline you might recommend or have used in the past, bringing point cloud data, or do you generally mesh the data before you bring it into game engines?
So I'm going to say it right now, I don't have deep Unreal experience.
Oh, sure, no worries.
But I work with a lot of my clients who are using these outputs in there, and the feedback they give to me is that doing the meshing of the point clouds outside of Unreal and then bringing them in is their preferred workflow.
That's our experience as well.
Yeah. It's just been because they say like dealing with the point clouds in there can be quite clunky, and actually getting all of the details, it still struggles a bit. But
Cool, thank you so much.
Any more questions?
one more at the back there.
Yeah. Oh, I'll go here first. You go.
Hi. I was wondering if you knew of any scanners that have a resolution high enough that a photogrammetry pass wouldn't be relevant at all. Like even if it's like a super high end, are we there yet where photogrammetry, combining them, it's not needed?
I missed the beginning of that, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Are you aware of any scanners that have high enough picture quality that a photogrammetry pass isn't necessary?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so our ITC does have a 4K camera on it, but you're getting a panoramic image. You can get cube faces as well, which is why people still like to get like handheld ones as well, because of that overlap between the images and getting all the positions. It really depends on looking at like the passes. The ones that have the good cameras are typically the more expensive ones.
Okay, thank you.
No handheld ones though, as yet, getting that level of picture quality, unless you're doing like metrology products. Those kind of scanners go to sub-millimeter accuracies, and then you can like get loads of pictures at the same time, which are pretty incredible.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi, if you had multiple static laser scanners in one location, what's the best way to reconcile those point clouds into one point cloud?
So there's a few different ways you can do it. Depends on how close together the scans are and how dense they are. Is this something you're asking because you're trying to do it at the moment, or just for general knowledge?
Yeah, I was just wondering about it for an idea I have.
So two main ways. The first one is cloud to cloud. That's pretty much an industry standard between different products. There's lots of different products out there for it, but basically you overlay one point cloud to the next. As long as you've got sufficient overlap between them, you can then pull them together that way. It's like being a bit of a digital puzzle person, and then the software does the rest in terms of iterating them close together. And then the other option...
Say the name of the software, because I missed that.
Sorry, I was talking about the algorithm, which is cloud to cloud, but the software for that one is Register 360.
What's the name of the algorithm?
Cloud to cloud.
And the software again?
Register 360. And then the other option for bringing scans together is vertex to vertex, where you can pick known points between scenes and then join them that way, which is quite similar to photogrammetry. Awesome. Any other questions?
Grab the mic, thanks. We have a question down here? No? Did you have a question? Okay.
You're happy with this content.
Yeah, it was like the last question. If I wanted to start into this world of LiDAR scanners, not photogrammetry. Where would be a good place to start for a small to medium-sized studio that doesn't have a huge amount of money but has enough to sort of have a look at hiring or working with mid-range to low-range scans?
Yeah. So I deal with lots of different clients of various sizes. Quite a lot of the larger ones will buy these outright because they can afford it. They start at around 50k and they go up to like 150. So you're not looking at a small cost for the actual purchase of these devices. But to hire them, they start at $500 a day. And a lot of my smaller clients will do that for a while until they have the business case to justify purchasing. So you can test it out and learn the full workflow that way. Awesome.
I don't know much about this subject at all, but Gaussian splatting, is that something interesting?
Sorry, there was a bit of a switch between the speakers. Oliver can speak to you about Gaussian splatting if you're interested in learning more about that afterwards.
Cool, thanks.
Any more questions? Anyone?
Well, thank you all for coming. If no more.